A massive transfer of wealth is right around the corner, and your constituent base is changing. Are your fundraising efforts ready? This episode is sponsored by QGive by Bloomerang, an online fundraising solution that helps thousands of nonprofits raise money for their causes. Through online giving and event registration forms, text fundraising, peer-to-peer campaigns, and auction events, QGive's tools help fundraisers like you raise more. QGive surveyed donors of all ages to create the brand new Generational Giving Report, a comprehensive guide to help you best connect with constituents of all generations. To learn how new generations want to support you, hear from you, and stay connected with you, head to jcsocialmarketing.com/QGive. That's jcsocialmarketing.com/QGIV to be notified when the report is released and to receive your free copy. On to the show. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello. Hi, everyone. This is Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell. Today, we're talking about Google Ad Grants. Most of you have probably heard of Google Ad Grants. Maybe some of you are dabbling with them. You're interested in how to better utilize this incredible program and how to get better results. So if you've encountered the Google Ad Grant program, you do probably recognize that it is valuable because it's really free advertising money. No other company does this, right? You can't advertise for free on YouTube or LinkedIn. Meta certainly doesn't give you any free Facebook ads or Instagram ads. So what's so great about this program is since 2003, Google Ad Grants has given over $9 billion in free advertising to over 115,000 nonprofits in more than 50 countries. I mean, that's pretty significant. But what are the benefits? Like, how can you calculate what the Google Ad Grant is worth to your nonprofit? So to help demystify the Google Ad Grant and show us how to find success on the platform, I have invited my friend Jessica King to the podcast. Jessica is the business lead at Getting Attention, where she helps nonprofits acquire and manage the Google Ad Grant to expand their impact. And prior to her work at Getting Attention, Jessica worked at nonprofits and higher education organizations where she focused on communication and digital marketing. Most recently, she worked in search engine optimization in the mission-driven sector. So she is a wealth of information on this topic. Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, Julia. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be chatting about Google Ad Grants today.
Yes. So we worked on a webinar together back in 2023, and it was so successful. So I had to have you back on the podcast to give us all your latest tips and secrets. So let's talk about how you got started in this work, specifically with like SEO and Google Ad Grants.
Yeah, I mean, not a ton to share outside of that. I was very interested in the nonprofit sphere. I've always kind of been drawn to people who are working on issues that they're passionate about, working on things that are going to make the world better. And my background is in communication and in marketing. So I worked in the social media sphere for a little while and then transitioned into SEO. And I really was able to see that Google is a really powerful tool for marketing and one that I think is a little intimidating, especially in the nonprofit world. I think people come in maybe with a base level of comfort, at least with social media, because it's something you use in your day-to-day life. But
Right.
with Google, outside of searching for things, most people aren't really interacting with that kind of content side, with that strategy side, et cetera. So worked in SEO for a little while and was able to transition into working a little bit more directly with nonprofits when I started my work with the Google Ad Grant. So that's kind of how I got into that and got into the world of paid advertising and started working there.
So specifically with paid advertising or with the Google Ad Grant as well, what are some of the most important benefits that we need to know for nonprofits?
Yeah, I think that, whenever we're talking to nonprofits, I think I always like to, keep in mind that budget is a big thing. It is, for a lot of organizations, the most important thing and a scarce resource. So I think when we talk about paid anything, that's very intimidating for a lot of organizations because they're like, I am already fighting for my life to fundraise out here. How am I going to incorporate a paid channel? But the kind of unfortunate situation that we encounter today is that a lot of different marketing channels, digital marketing channels specifically, for years we've been talking about how it is really democratic. Anybody can get started for free. A lot of the free versions of these platforms are not as powerful or don't get results as quickly or in as targeted of a way as when you use the paid channels. I think this is kind of logical when you remember that there is a company behind Google, there is a company behind Meta, who, they need to pay their employees as well. And so I think where the Google Ad Grant is a really cool tool for nonprofits specifically is it gives you access to a lot of the benefits of paid search when you're thinking about kind of how you can improve your visibility on Google. But the program, and we can kind of talk about what the specifics of the program are in a second, but the program allows you to dip your toes in that water without paying anything out of your own pocket, which is, I think, for most nonprofits, where that value really lies.
Exactly. What you said is so important. I always say that social media or digital marketing is free, like a puppy is free. Like you can get a free puppy from your neighbor.
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes into it. And then, like you just said, I think organic reach is plummeting. The ability to reach people online without these paid tools is actually really decreasing. So we have to be realistic about that. And Google is, of course, the number one search engine that everyone's using to find things. And the fact that they're offering this kind of free advertising is kind of mind-boggling to me. With the Google Ad Grant, like, what do we need to think about? Like, who's it for? And are there any exclusions?
Yeah. So I'll chat about the eligibility a little bit. So, by the way, it is available in a lot of different countries. At Getting Attention, we work not exclusively, but primarily with US-based organizations. So most of what I'm going to chat about here is US specific. But if you were to Google for nonprofits, insert your country here, you can see whether this program is available to you and how that might differ. Usually the requirements are going to look very similar from country to country. So first of all, you have to be a registered charity organization. So in the US, that means you have to be specifically a 501c3. That's really important.
No fiscal sponsor. If you have a fiscal sponsor, that wouldn't work.
Nope. Okay. We need at least who applies for the grant. So we need there to be a 501c3 and a high quality website. And that's a whole can of worms that we can open in a second if we want to. But to kind of continue on this eligibility thing, there are a couple of exclusions. So if you are a university or a K-12 school, you are not going to be eligible for the Google Ad Grant. Google does have a suite of products that is designed for the education sphere. It is very easily named Google for Education, so you can look into that. And those are sort of the products that Google has that are intended for organizations that fall under that. Additionally, if you are a government organization, you are not eligible. So if your website address ends in .gov, pretty good chance that you are not going to be eligible for the Google Ad Grant. And then the last group that is not eligible, but I will say this is kind of a hazier category, is healthcare organizations. So the intent, I believe, is to filter out like hospitals, organizations that are truly booking appointments, providing healthcare. However, in my sort of experience on the ground, I've seen that the line on that is a little fuzzy. I've seen groups that I would consider to be healthcare organizations get the ad grant. And, so if you're listening to this and you're a nonprofit, let's say you do vaccine clinics, you promote public health, but you're maybe not a, brick and mortar hospital, I would recommend applying for the ad grant because there's no negative consequence to applying and getting rejected other than you spent 5 minutes on the application and get it. But I think if you are curious about it, it's worth doing the application to see. I wish I had a little bit firmer, hard and fast rules about how you can tell if you are a healthcare organization or not.
You just have to apply, I think.
For that group that's applying. So that is who is eligible. And the kind of value of the program, as we chatted about, is it gives you access to paid world of Google searches at no cost to your organization.
So when we're considering the application, what do we need to apply? Do we need to have some ducks in a row? Because I know, like, for the charitable fundraising tools on Meta, you need to have some specific documentation and some things.
Yeah. So for the Google for Nonprofits program, it is pretty straightforward. Usually what you will need is your tax ID number. So if you're in the US, your EIN. For other countries, you're going to have to sort of do your research on what specific forms are needed there, but Google will usually spell those out. And then you are going to need just some really basic information about your organization. So your address, things like that. Basically, what happens with the Google for Nonprofit application is it's kind of designed to be fairly accessible for organizations to do themselves. It's really not designed to be a big burden, a difficult hurdle to jump. It's very user friendly. In fact, for a long time, we actually used to apply on our clients' behalf. So it used to be the type of thing that even like your marketing agency could do. Google's made some changes to their verification process, which is kind of what happens after you submit their applications, that has made it make more sense for us to apply with our clients, basically walk them through the process, but have our clients submit the actual application themselves. And what that change is Google's verification partner. It used to be a company called TechSoup. Now it is a company called Percent. They basically act almost as a background checker for Google. So what will happen is you'll submit your Google for Nonprofits application, and then Percent will reach out and basically ask you to submit some verification that they are talking to an actual representative of the nonprofit organization. So in my experience, for a lot of clients, being able to email from a email address that is associated with your nonprofit, so like Red Cross as an example, just name a huge nonprofit, right? If you're marketing manager at redcross.org, Percent is going to kind of assume for the most part that you are actually employed by the nonprofit. So they may ask for some follow-up details, but these are usually not burdensome. And the entire kind of process, if you are starting from scratch with Google for Nonprofits, you can complete the application yourself, I'd say within 10 minutes. It's very fast. And then usually the follow-up from the Google team is also relatively speedy. In my experience, it's usually within 3 to 5 business days, so in about a week. This is sometimes subject to delays, just depending on how many applications they are processing on their end at a given time. But generally speaking, that's the window you're looking for. So this is that step one.
I have a question about the amount. So if, say, we apply on March 13th,
right?
Does it go until April 13th, or is it calendar month that you have to spend the $10,000, or that the $10,000 is available to you?
Yeah, we usually track it on the calendar month. And in my experience, that's sort of where the cutoffs, if you will, seem to fall. I'm not sure if we actually mentioned the dollar amount at some point on the podcast yet. But yeah, so what the Google Ad Grant gets you once you get approved for the program is up to $10,000 US dollars per month advertising spend that can be used in Google Ads, specifically Google search ads. So yeah, the question of sort of whether that's on a rolling basis or a monthly basis, from what I've observed, it seems to be on a monthly basis, sort of calendar month, day 1 to day 30, 31. But I would say for most nonprofits, you can start spending that money right away. And if you are on track, there's no sort of artificial cap that's introduced at the end of the month. Generally speaking, with our clients, what we're looking for is sort of a steady level of spend across the month, so that you are ideally bringing in results on a slightly more consistent basis. So you could hit it hard if you applied mid-month and see how much you can get out of it. But generally speaking, we see that on a beginning of the month to end of the month basis.
This is a big question. I know that for a lot of the nonprofits I speak to, when I talk about digital advertising, it's confusing about how it works. And it's different than buying a newspaper ad, which has like a set cost, or buying a billboard, which has a set cost, or buying an ad in a flyer those have set costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is about bidding and this is about keywords. And can you talk about how the $10,000 is sort of allocated and
Yes.
what we should be thinking about when we're spending this? Well, we'll talk about what makes it successful, but how does this really work? Like, what is the $10,000 paying for?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, and it starts to get into the mechanics of how Google Ads even operate. So one thing you will hear when we talk about like paid search, a synonym for it or another name you'll hear for it sometimes is pay per click. And that pay per click is essentially how it works. So basically what happens is when you are going to submit advertisements to Google Ads, and we'll just kind of keep it to search because I think this is really the basis. It's the main one you can use in the Google Ad Grant and is, in my opinion, one of the easier ones to understand. So you are in a big pool with a bunch of other nonprofit advertisers, right? So let's say you are the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and let's say you've got another organization that is also looking to alleviate conditions for folks with diabetes, right? Your two organizations may be hoping to show up on similar keywords. When I say keywords, I mean the terms that folks are searching in Google. So they might be searching, how to know if you have diabetes, let's say. So Google will look at the entire pool of advertisers, and based on a lot of different factors, so based on how popular the search is, based on how many different advertisers are trying to show up for those same terms. Sometimes it can be based on your location, the audience you're trying to reach, the time of day, all these different factors. They assign a price to the click. So if a user searches, how do I know if I have diabetes? And clicks on an ad, Google says maybe that's worth $4, which means every time somebody clicks on your ad, Google is adding $4 to your bill. So that's where that 10,000 comes in. You can spend up to $10,000 in clicks on your advertisements. The price per click, this is a common thing that I hear about the Google Ad Grant, because one of the rules of the program is that your bid, or sort of the amount that you as the organization say that a click is worth to you, is capped at $2 per click. And obviously the reason for that is to make sure that people aren't going, like $8,000 for a click on a keyword.
Oh, okay.
But the good news about that, and so I will sometimes hear nonprofits be like, I don't know how we could get around this. We are trying to advertise on really competitive keywords. Good news about that is that there are some ways to get around that if you can use Google's machine learning based bidding. The machine will bid for you and will bid higher than that $2 cap sometimes. So that's one way that we found to get around that limitation, which has improved the usability of the ad grant accounts.
I think all of this has just convinced me to just hire an expert. Because I'm thinking, wow, I mean, there's so much to consider. I know some nonprofits do run it themselves. So for those that run it themselves or are considering, they really are thinking about like, can we do this best in-house or should we outsource it? What are some of the factors that impact the Google Ad Grants return on investment, or ROI?
Yeah, ROI is a huge conversation that we have, of course, obviously, as ad grant managers with the clients that we work with, but also in general when I'm chatting with nonprofits who are thinking about using this and who aren't sure if it's the right move for them. Mm-hmm. The tricky part about ROI for the Google Ad Grant is that it's going to vary a lot depending on what your organization's goals are and what you are trying to achieve with it.
Yes.
One thing that I do like to tell nonprofits, because it is a powerful tool, but it is a marketing tool. It is not a fundraising tool, which is, I think, what so many nonprofits that I encounter, they want for it to be like great, we tell Google to just go out and get us donations and the donations roll in. And you can get donations from the Google Ad Grant, but that's not its primary purpose and that's not what it excels at. So some of the homework that you will want to do on your end is thinking about what marketing outcomes are going to be most impactful to you, where we've seen it and where I think it is best applied. Awareness building is a huge goal, and especially for smaller, mid-sized nonprofits who are like, hey, we do good work, but nobody knows about us, right? People are not coming to the site. We are struggling to show up in front of people who would we know from our data, be interested in our work. That is where the Google Ad Grant can really help you. And I think what I would focus on would be what are called conversions in ad lingo. These are basically people completing meaningful actions on your website. So you get to specify what those are. And that's the work that I really encourage our nonprofit clients to be thinking about. So for a lot of nonprofits, that's going to be things like capturing emails so that you can nurture potential future donors over time, or future volunteers, or however people can support your mission, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one that's very tangible. That is one way that we can measure ROI. We have some clients who volunteers are what power them and what kind of make their organization work. Volunteer applications are another great example of something that the Google Ad Grant can support. And then we do, like I said, for many of our clients, we run donation campaigns. It's not that it's impossible to get donations from the Google Ad Grant, but it does not replace your team developing close relationships with your donor. It does not replace your team going out and sort of interacting with folks out in the world. So when you're thinking about that question of ROI, I would be very clear on what is valuable for your organization, because the Google Ad Grant might be a great tool to support it. But if your sort of primary thing is we need donations in the door today, investing in fundraising might be the better option for you at that time.
I completely agree. And I think that social media was sort of sold as this bill of goods for a while, where you set up a page or you set up the donate button and donations are going to roll in.
Yeah. If you build it, they will come.
If you build it, they will come. Exactly. What you said is so important, because I believe that marketing is such an important pillar of every nonprofit's organization. Like, it should be such a pillar of like creating awareness, getting people to understand what you do, building trust and affinity. I think what organizations might need to understand is that, yes, thousands and millions of dollars are raised online, but it's usually for something that's in the news. You know, it's people are Googling donate to Gaza, or, you know, donate to Ukraine relief, or donate to the hurricane in Haiti, or they're thinking about things in the news. And so if you're a little local nonprofit, a library, or you are a literacy organization, you're a food bank, there aren't going to be millions of searches on donate to Beverly, Massachusetts food bank, but there might be volunteer, or there might be how can I donate food, or other keywords that you could rank for.
Yeah, and the keyword strategy is a really core component of things that can make or break your success with the Google Ad Grant. I sometimes work with nonprofits who want to show up for things like best nonprofit to donate to, which is one, an extremely competitive keyword, and two, not very specific. One of the things that I tell nonprofits a lot, both when I'm doing sort of educational webinars, educational podcasts, things like that, and when we're chatting about their accounts, is that Google has its own priorities and its own sort of outcomes that they're looking for as a business. What Google wants to be known for is giving you the most relevant result every time. So as an advertiser, you need to play by Google's rules, because we are in Google's playground, right? So we want to make sure that we are going after keywords that are going to be really, really relevant to your nonprofit, to the work you do, because Google is going to say, hey, that looks great. Why don't we show that to folks who this will be relevant to? And that's sort of a virtuous cycle, rather than best nonprofits to donate to, which is relevant to nobody.
I completely agree. It's just the same with social media. We have to play by the rules of the algorithm. We don't need to completely water down what we do and defy our brand voice, but we need to understand what the users of these platforms are looking for. Obviously, Google and these major companies are very concerned about pleasing the user, because they don't want them to go to other search engines or other social media sites. So how do we know if the ads are working? I know it's determined on our goals. Mm-hmm. How do you usually calculate the ROI for a Google Ad Grant?
I like to highlight 4 different metrics that folks can use. And I also want to give a quick caveat before I get into them that all 4 of them are important. I would not ignore one if the other is looking really good, because these metrics paint a picture together. But there are kind of 4 main metrics that you're going to want to be tracking. So the first one, and I would argue if there was one standalone one, it would probably be this one, is conversions. So conversions, like we talked about, those meaningful actions, that is basically your understanding of whether your ads are creating the outcome that you want them to create. So if your goal, let's say, is to get more newsletter subscribers, you're like, we have great things going on. We just need more people to be in our kind of communications ecosystem, getting our message on a regular basis. Then if that's the purpose of your ad campaign and your ad isn't doing that, then that would imply that you're going to need to make some changes further upstream. So conversions is a big one. Ad grant spend is a big one as well. So ideally, we are maximizing that $10,000 per month. The thing that I will say about that 10,000, that's an extremely generous budget for a lot of organizations, especially when you think about these smaller, very local nonprofits. If you are not spending that full 10K, that does not necessarily mean that your ad grant has failed or that you are not getting results. That's why it's so important to sort of compare that ad grant spend with the rest of the metrics that we're going to talk about here, right? So we've got conversions, we've got ad grant spend. We also have clicks and its sister metric, which is click-through rate. So clicks, exactly what it sounds like. How many people clicked on your ad and arrived at your website? The reason that click-through rate is a sister metric is because that's going to tell you basically what percentage of the people who saw your ads were interested enough to click it. So if your clicks are going up over time, but your click-through rate is going down, that's an ambiguous metric, right? That could be good in the sense that you're getting more people in, but it could also mean that you're maybe casting too wide of a net with your advertising. Maybe you're not getting as many people. It could also be a good thing if you are managing to show up on more broadly searched terms, right? So that's kind of why we're pairing all of these things together, because if your clicks are going up, maybe your click-through rate has gone down, but your conversions are going up, that would probably imply, like I said, that you are just getting onto a more broadly searched term, right? So we've gone from maybe 100 people have seen it, your click-through rate is a certain percent. Now 1,000 people are seeing it. Your click-through rate is going to drop a little bit, but 2% of 1,000 versus 2% of 100 is going to be very different numbers in terms of clicks and ideally conversions. And similarly, you might see your ad spend fluctuate in conjunction with that. So this is sort of where understanding what that core outcome is, those conversions, that's kind of why I would say if there is one that's most important, it's probably that, because that's kind of going to be your North Star of like, we've said that these are our most important outcomes. Are we on track for that? And if so, we can kind of tweak and fiddle and change things around in the account and see how we can kind of massage the results to get better and better for those conversion outcomes.
Right. It is all about having that strategy in the beginning and really determining what we're trying to accomplish, because you can't measure ROI if you don't know what you were trying to accomplish in the first place.
Yeah.
No, that's so interesting. And then you didn't answer this. Do you have to spend the entire 10K every month?
You do not have to spend the entire 10K every month. No. And you will not, this is another question that I sometimes get, like, will Google in some way penalize you? Like, I think an experience that probably not a lot of nonprofits who work with foundations, things like that, it's not like a use it or lose it type of budget, right? So if you're consistently spending, let's say 7K of the ad grant, it's not like Google's going to come to you and be like, we've noticed you've only spent 7K for the past 6 months, so you only get 7K forever, right? It is okay to not spend that. To maintain the grant month to month. Oh, another question that I get a lot is, do you have to reapply for the grant at any point? No. If you maintain the grant, and I'll talk about how you do that in just a second, it will renew on its own in perpetuity until and unless Google changes the program somehow. So it is a one-time application. That part is pretty straightforward. To maintain the grant, you need to do two things. You need to get at least a 5% click-through rate. So what that means is that at least 5% of the folks who see your ad need to click on it. This is where that goes back to that relevance thing, right? So we want to make sure that we are showing people really relevant ads so that they will be more likely to click on it. And I will say that is a tall ask. The industry standard for the click-through rate of ads just out in the world tends to be about 2%. So Google really wants you to be putting your best foot forward as far as advertising goes. Other requirement is getting at least one conversion per month. The great news about that is in your control, right? You get to decide what the conversions are, which is why for our clients, I will typically recommend doing a blend of conversions. So you might have some conversions that are donations submitted, right? And in some good months, you might get a lot. Like we are in Women's Month right now. If you are a nonprofit whose work centers around bettering the lives of women, you're probably experiencing a pretty strong donation month. But in a couple of months, that might not be the case, right? So donations are some. Email signups would be another one. There's a lot of different things you can track and mark as conversions. Sometimes I've seen views of key pages. So, like when our nonprofits are running specific campaigns to draw attention to new programs that they have, things like that. How many folks are landing on this page and looking at the materials, maybe playing a video? There's all kinds of different things. So, we don't want to sort of introduce fluff because we don't want to tell Google, go out and find more people who will do whatever random thing we did just to maintain the grant. However, you can kind of smooth the ride by having some conversions that are going to be very achievable, very much consistent month over month over month, and then some conversions that are maybe more directly tied to bigger goals like fundraising, things like that.
That's so smart. And let's go back to talk about high quality website.
Yeah.
Because what I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand, or they understand it because they understand it as a consumer. If you're a consumer, you're going to Google, you're going to look, you click on it, you want it to be exactly what you were searching for. And you want it to be obviously mobile optimized and able to be looked at from your mobile device. But for nonprofits, how can they better, what does high performing websites mean to Google? And how can we better improve the page they're going to when they click on the ad?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And I think there's going to be kind of a simpler answer, and then there's going to be kind of a more technical answer. If you are looking for sort of what is the simple answer, Google's kind of definition of a high quality website as far as the application process goes is you need to have organization specific information. So people need to know basics. What's your address? Maybe who works on your staff? Where are you located? Like who do you help? Things like that. Really core basics that ideally anyone on your staff should really be able to share. And then the other thing it says is mission relevant content. So there is a level of completeness that your website will need to have in order to get good results from the ad grant program. What I will say about that is that honestly, the application is very seldom the barrier. I've seen nonprofits who are very new, very much starting out, who have kind of the minimum descriptions of their mission and stuff get approved for the ad grant. That is not usually the hard part. The hard part comes when you begin advertising and you begin trying to reach people. This is where we kind of move into the more technical answer, which is that Google is a robot, which is not news probably to anybody here. But what that means is that Google understands a web page very differently than how you as a human user understand a web page. So when we as the human users are looking at a web page, we can see based on, the colors that the website designer has used, based on where pictures are located, based on what's bold, what's in bigger font, things like that, we can kind of begin to put together, okay, here's the sections of the website, here's the sections of the content, here's kind of the design of it, right? Google has to be told really specifically what the layout of the site is and things like that. So there are, if you have ever created content in a content builder on a website, there are lots of little settings. They're called like H1, H2, H3, paragraph. These have meaning, which I occasionally encounter nonprofits who did not realize that those have meaning and were kind of assuming that they were simply formatting settings, like they just sort of decorative, right? They are not.
How Google crawls the site.
Exactly. It's how Google kind of understands how things are structured. So one way that I'll kind of explain it is very similar to a textbook, right? So if you were reading a textbook, we'll think back to high school, right? You would have the chapter title, and that might be your H2, right? Or your title of your book, kind of depending on how your page is structured. Then you might have subtitles, and that's where those H3s come in. That's that smaller section. And then we get even smaller. There might be like a little call out box. That might be your H4. There's going to be pictures, and the caption is going to in some way relate to the content of the picture and kind of explain why that photo is included. These are things like your captions and your alt text. And so you want to be thinking as you are building the page of how these things are understood by Google, which is a robot. That is starting to get, this is where it kind of like tiptoes into the world of SEO. There is a lot of overlap between SEO and paid search because they are both intended to please Google, which is that robot. So one of the things that I would say if you are a nonprofit and you're kind of looking at your website and you're like, I'm not actually sure whether our website is readable or not, Moz and SEMrush, both of which are their keyword research tools for folks who work in SEO, they both offer some really good free classes. I know the SEMrush ones are free, and I believe that the Moz trainings are free too, but
I'll put those in the show notes, Moz and SEMrush. I'll put it in under tools.
Yeah, they offer some free trainings that'll basically just tell you, hey, here's kind of what you're looking for and here's how to look at your website. I would start there and just run some really basic checks. So the really basic checks you're going to run are, how's your formatting looking? So are you including formatting in an intentional way? And then the other thing is, and I believe this is true of both Moz and SEMrush, I think both of them have a free like trial level. I would not encourage the nonprofits who are listening to like go out and buy a SEMrush subscription today. It's probably not necessary, but you can use the trial levels, the free trials, to begin doing some very basic keyword research. So looking for what are the relative volumes, like how much are these terms being searched per month? These are going to tell you what types of terms you should be targeting for your organization that are going to be relevant to your mission. And most keyword tools are going to give you suggestions. So let's say, going back to that Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation example, like let's say you're currently advertising on diabetes diagnosis, what do I do now? That's going to be, there are probably some people searching that, but that's going to be kind of an unusual way to format that. A better example might be like what to do after diabetes diagnosis, something like that, right? So
how to support someone with a diabetes diagnosis.
Exactly. Yep. So these tools will supply some related keywords and some broader keywords that you can kind of begin to work out from there and say, okay, these are the types of things that need to be featured in our titles, in our section headings, in these kind of core places so that Google understands what our site is about. Another example that I like to use sometimes that might be a little bit easier to understand would be like if you are an animal shelter or a like humane society of some kind. A lot of people are searching for terms like animal shelter near me. You might have a section that says like animal shelter in insert your city name here. You might also have a lot of people who are searching adopt a puppy, adopt a kitten. So you can have sections on your website that say like adoptable dogs, adoptable cats, and you might be able to adjust the wording on those based on sort of what versions of them are getting searched more. And Google is pretty smart. Google does understand a lot of synonyms. It does understand searches that are related that any human would kind of understand are the same search. So if I search dogs for adoption versus adoptable dogs, any human understands that that's the same search. Google understands that too. So you don't have to feel overwhelmed by how do I include every possible variation on the site. What these keyword volumes help you do is identify the one that's going to be best for you to focus on and allow you to kind of focus on that one and understand that some of the other variations are going to be picked up because Google understands context like that.
And I think it's so important that nonprofits know that Google wants you to succeed. Like Google wants to get the person that is looking for you to find you. That is their goal because that makes everybody happy, right? That makes you happy. That makes the user happy. That makes advertisers happy. That makes people continue to use and trust Google. So it kind of is in their best interest to get interested parties to your website in the most efficient and effective way possible. So we do have to think about like that. I always think about it like they're rooting for us because they want the people that are searching to find what they want because it's like a win-win cycle. Yes. So, we can't think that they're working against us. We have to just always be kind of positive. It might be technically difficult. It might be hard to set up, might be hard to manage. But we're coming at time, but I have one more big picture question. So I talk a lot about marketing strategy, digital fundraising strategy. How does the ad grant fit into a nonprofit's holistic marketing strategy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question and one that I really like talking about because I think that if you are a smaller organization, especially because I find that they're very strapped for time and for resources, one really cool thing about using Google is that what you are already doing to improve your website to show up better in the organic search results are going to really benefit you in the paid search arena as well. So there is a lot of double dipping that can be done as far as keyword research goes. As far as once you structure a page really well, you've really got it cleaned up and you are confident that Google is going to respond well to it, you can begin running ads to that page, right? So it is very much a kind of ecosystem that supports itself there. What I will also say about running ads is it can help speed up the processes that you are already doing with SEO. So I used to work in SEO back in the day, and it takes a long time for things to grow organically. So when you are trying to improve your rankings on Google, trying to show up organically, it can take 6, 12, sometimes even 18 months to really begin to see results from that. From advertising, for a lot of organizations, 3 to 6 months is what we're looking at for the ramp up. So it's much, much faster, and you have a higher degree of control over the sort of exact wording, the exact pages that show up, things like that. So I think when you're thinking about kind of the merits of those two, those are really important. The other thing that I like to do is I also really like when we can use the ad grant to support the other marketing channels that organization is already running. So I kind of talked about the Google specific ones, but if you've got an email list, growing it via ads is a really good win for a lot of organizations. You can get folks in. Google processes 8 billion with a B searches per day. So there are a ton of people who are turning to Google for their various interests and needs throughout the day. If you can be scooping some of those and funneling them into your email list where you've been invited into their inbox to talk to them more directly, that's awesome. You can also use it to kind of drive people who are going to be likely to click on your social buttons. So if you have those on the website, you can tell Google, hey, find me more people who will click on my Instagram, who will click on my Facebook, et cetera. And so you can kind of use it to begin incorporating folks into that world as well. Last thing I'll say is if you are doing sort of best practices about updating your website regularly, making sure that it is user-friendly, robot-friendly, and up-to-date. This is also really great for your social media efforts because it means that you can begin to set up systems that from social drive people to your site, which is ideally kind of where they're living as your organization gets more developed, or at least that's sort of my stance on it. And you can recycle content from the website in social posts. So it's a kind of beneficial cycle there. So I think that the ad grant can kind of supplement the ecosystem in a lot of ways. But I think one of the best ways is sort of by getting organizations to think a little more critically about what's on their website, how they're showing up, and kind of getting strategic when it comes to Google, which can be a very intimidating nut to crack.
I'm telling you, I get asked all the time, we are the best kept secret. How do we get found? How do we attract new people to our cause? And these were just some very tactical, very specific and helpful techniques and tactics that we can use. And I just appreciate it so much, Jessica. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad it was helpful.
Yeah. So where can people find more about you and getting attention and more of your resources and how to work with you?
Yeah, so probably the best place to find more resources is going to be the Getting Attention website. So that is gettingattention.org. We have a ton of resources there. We have some quick explainer videos. So if you're kind of like, I don't feel like I quite understood what was going on with the ad grant, or sort of, I don't really understand where an ad grant manager fits into the picture, we got lots of quick videos to summarize that. Then we have a really robust blog with all sorts of topics on the Google ad grant, really step-by-step instructions for the application process, eligibility, things like that. We have a lot of deep dives, as well as some more general information about a lot of nonprofit marketing topics. So I think that is going to be sort of the best way to get started. And then if you're interested in connecting with me, I am also on LinkedIn. So you can feel free to connect with me there. And then maybe, Julia, we could leave the link in the show notes. Yeah,
absolutely.
But I'm always happy to chat with nonprofits and to talk more about the ad grant.
Well, your enthusiasm is infectious and your knowledge is just so vast. So thanks for sharing it with us today.
Yeah, it's been super fun.
Well, hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review, because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.